The wind howled across the white plains of Silver Creek, sweeping through the endless stretch of snow and pine. The world seemed frozen in silence, save for the rhythmic creak of a lone wagon making its way through the drifts. Inside, wrapped in a wool blanket, sat Clara Whitfield, a woman of soft eyes and quiet strength. Her golden hair peeked from beneath her fur-lined bonnet, and her gloved hands trembled slightly as she clutched her coat tighter. The storm had worsened, and she feared the trail might vanish beneath the snow. Then she saw him, a figure on horseback, his coat flapping like a dark banner in the wind. He guided his stallion toward a wagon with steady confidence, his jaw dusted with frost, his eyes a deep shade of gray. "You shouldn't be out here alone, ma'am," he said, voice rough from the cold. "Roads are near impassable tonight." Clara studied him for a moment, unsure whether to trust a stranger on a snowy trail, but the storm's fury left her little choice. "I'm heading to Silver Creek," she murmured. The man nodded, removing his hat respectfully. "So, my name's Luke Callahan. Mind if I ride along, miss?" Her heart fluttered. "Whitfield," she replied softly. "Clara Whitfield." As the storm raged, Luke helped guide the wagon through the snow-covered pines. Each gust of icy wind pushed them closer together, and though their words were few, a quiet bond began to form in the rhythm of their journey. Luke was a rancher, returning from a long cattle drive, and Clara was on her way to teach at the new schoolhouse in Silver Creek. When night fell, they found refuge in an abandoned line cabin nestled between fir trees. Luke built a fire while Clara unpacked what little food she had: some biscuits, a jar of preserves, and her apples. The warmth of the flames danced across their faces, casting a soft glow that made the small cabin feel almost like home. "You've got courage," Luke said, leaning against the wall. "Most folks wouldn't travel this road in winter." Clara smiled faintly. "I didn't have much of a choice. The town's children need a teacher, and I suppose I needed a new beginning." The storm beat against the walls, yet inside there was peace. For the first time in months, Clara felt safe. She looked up to find Luke watching her, not with boldness, but with something gentler, something she hadn't felt since long ago. The fire crackled, and outside, the snow fell soft and endless. By morning, the world had turned to silver. Snow covered the valley in a quiet beauty that stole their breath. Luke saddled his horse, and together they began the final stretch towards Silver Creek. The sun hung low, turning the frost to diamonds on the branches. Along the way, they talked not about the storm, but about dreams, the kind people only speak of in the hush of winter. Clara told him of her life back east, of losing her parents, and how she longed to do something that mattered. Luke listened with quiet respect, his eyes soft with understanding. He told her about the ranch he was trying to rebuild after a hard year, how loneliness was a steady companion. "Maybe it takes a cold winter to remind us what warmth really means," he said. Clara smiled, her breath a mist in the air. She realized how naturally her heart leaned toward him, like a flower reaching for sunlight through frost. When they reached the ridge overlooking the town, the sight was breathtaking: chimneys smoking, church steeple glinting through the haze. But Clara's gaze lingered not on the town, but on Luke, whose eyes held a promise she couldn't yet name. The next few days in Silver Creek passed like a dream. Luke helped her settle into the small cabin near the schoolhouse, fixing her broken door and stacking firewood by the porch. The townsfolk noticed their closeness: Luke, the quiet rancher, and Clara, the new teacher with eyes like dawn, and whispered with knowing smiles. Each evening, Luke returned from tending his horses to share supper with her, sometimes bringing wildflowers or a loaf of bread from the bakery. One evening, as snowflakes drifted lazily outside, he found her struggling to light the stove. "Here," he murmured, kneeling beside her, his hands brushing hers as he struck the match. The fire caught, and for a moment their faces were inches apart, the glow painting their cheeks in gold. You make even the cold feel kind," she whispered, surprising herself. Luke smiled softly, his voice low. "Maybe it's because I found something worth warming up to." The silence that followed was rich and full, the kind that needed no words. Outside, the snow fell heavier, but inside that small cabin, love had quietly begun to bloom like spring beneath the frost. Weeks passed, and the bond between them deepened with every visit. Clara found herself waiting by the window each afternoon, listening for the sound of hoofbeats in the snow. Luke would arrive with a half-grin and a bundle of firewood or a newspaper from town, and she'd scold him gently for bringing gifts when his own ranch needed tending. "Can't help it," he'd reply. "Seems I've got more reason to come here than stay home." The winter had been harsh, but their laughter filled the quiet evenings. They read books by lamplight, shared stories of childhood, and sometimes simply sat watching the snow. Yet beneath the warmth, both carried fears. Luke wondered if a woman like Clara could truly belong in his rough world. Clara worried that love was too fragile to survive the harshness of the frontier. But one evening, as a blizzard howled outside, he took her hands in his and said, "I've spent too many winters alone. I don't want another one without you." Her heart trembled. "Then don't," she whispered. In that moment, the storm outside no longer mattered. Only the two of them did. The morning after that storm was a quiet kind of magic. The sky had cleared, revealing a soft pink dawn that brushed the snowy fields in light. Clara stood by her window, wrapped in Luke's heavy coat, watching the smoke curl from his ranch across the valley. The night before still lingered. In her mind, the way his words had melted the distance between them, the way her heart had finally stopped wandering. She spent the day teaching the town's children, her spirit bright and alive. But each time the wind rattled the window panes, she thought of him. That evening, Luke rode into town with a sleigh he'd built himself, its edges trimmed with pine boughs and red ribbon. "Come with me," he said, his grin shy but full of hope. They rode out beneath the twilight sky, the sleigh gliding over the snow like a whisper. The stars shimmered above, and the bells on the horses' harness chimed softly. "You ever seen the river in moonlight?" he asked. She shook her head. When they reached the frozen river bank, the world seemed made of glass and silver. Clara caught her breath. Luke stepped down and offered his hand. "I figured you might like to dance." There was no music, only the wind, the stars, and the steady beat of two hearts finding rhythm in the cold night. As winter deepened, their love became the town's quiet secret and sweetest story. The townsfolk saw the way Luke's eyes softened whenever Clara entered the room, and how she blushed whenever someone mentioned his name. One Sunday morning after church, Luke waited for her outside, snowflakes resting on his dark hair. "Clara," he said, his voice carrying the sincerity of a man who meant every word he spoke. "I don't have much, just the ranch, a few horses, and a heart that's yours if you'll take it." Her eyes shimmered as she stepped closer. "You have more than most men, Luke Callahan. You have honesty, and that's worth more than gold." The church bell tolled in the distance, echoing through the valley. He pulled a small velvet ribbon from his pocket, tied round the silver ring. "Marry me, Clara. Let's build something that even the snow can't wash away." Tears blurred her vision, and for a long moment she couldn't speak. Then she whispered, yes, the word hung between them like a promise carved into the winter air. He lifted her hand to his lips, sealing it with warmth. Around them, the snow began to fall again, soft, endless, eternal. The weeks before their wedding were filled with both joy and hardship. The snow grew thicker, trapping the town in a hush of white. But nothing could dim the light in Clara's eyes. The women of Silver Creek sewed her a gown from linen and lace, while Luke repaired the small church's roof so their vows could be spoken beneath it. Some evenings they sat together in the flicker of lamplight, dreaming of the home they'd share, cabin on the ridge where sunrise touched the snow first. "Do you ever think about the spring?" Clara asked once. Luke smiled. "Every day. But I reckon I've already found my spring right here." On the night before their wedding, another blizzard swept in, fierce and unrelenting. Many thought they'd postpone, but Luke only smiled. "A little snow never stopped us before, and so, when morning came, and the town awoke under a blanket of white, the church bell still rang, the air was sharp, the world glistening. Luke stood at the altar, waiting, his heart steady and sure, when Clara entered, wrapped in lace and love. Every man and woman in Silver Creek knew they were witnessing something pure, something as enduring as the mountains. The ceremony was simple, yet it carried a weight of beauty words could never touch. The preacher spoke softly, his voice trembling with emotion as the couple stood hand in hand. Outside, the snow fell thick and silent, cloaking the town in a peace that seemed sent from heaven. When the vows were spoken, and Luke kissed his bride, the gathered crowd erupted in laughter and tears. They celebrated in the town hall, where lanterns glowed against the frosted windows, and the smell of apple pie and wood smoke filled the air. Luke held Clara close as they danced, his rough hands gentle on her waist. "Never thought I'd find heaven in the middle of winter," he whispered. She smiled up at him, her heart so full it hurt. "You found it, Luke. You built it." Later that night, they rode in the sleigh once more, heading toward the ridge where their new home awaited. The moonlight guided their way, and the cold air stung their cheeks, but their laughter rose like music. When they reached the cabin, Luke carried her over the threshold. "Welcome home, Mrs. Callahan," he said softly. She kissed him, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. "Home," she whispered, "at last." Years later, Silver Creek would remember that winter, the one when snow never ceased. And yet love bloomed warmer than spring. Luke and Clara's ranch became a place of stories and song, where travelers stopped to rest by the fire and hear of the night two hearts found each other beneath the falling snow. Every winter, when the first storm arrived, Clara would hang the same red ribbon from their porch, the one that had once tied her wedding ring. Luke, his hair now touched with gray, would smile and say, "Still the prettiest sight in all of Silver Creek." On quiet evenings, they'd sit together, hand in hand, watching the snow drift down from the heavens, content in the warmth they'd built. The wind would sing through the pines, but it carried no loneliness, only memories, laughter, and the steady beat of love that had endured every storm. And when spring finally came, the valley would bloom in color. But for them, it was always winter they cherished most, the season when their souls had met and the snow had fallen like a blessing from the sky.